Okay, Misty, let's bring you in now and talk about it from the perspective of your legal expertise. Both James Comey and Letitia James have other pending motions from their cases. They argue that they were selective and vindictive prosecutions. Will those motions still stand even if these dismissals are overturned?
So these motions at this point are actually moot. They have no bearing because the basis of this decision is that Lindsay Halligan's appointment was invalid, and therefore those indictments are void. So from a technical legal perspective, those motions don't exist because the case doesn't exist. I would expect that if the case is resurrected, remember, this was a dismissal without prejudice, and Gary laid out some of the potential paths, the appellate path, as well as potentially attempting to refile in that 6-month window. Those motions are likely to be resurrected at this time. But at this point, there's no way the judge is going to decide them, since technically those indictments do not exist. They are voided by the fact that Halligan's appointment was invalid.
And talk to us a little bit about the significance about the fact that the judge dismissed them without prejudice. What does that mean?
So that means it leaves a door open. If this has been with prejudice determination, the case is over, it's done, it can never come back. But because it's without prejudice, it leaves an opening for the Department of Justice to try and, number one, potentially cure the issue. So this would be what they're saying is a procedural issue. The 120 days expired, but that Halligan is in fact qualified, and therefore her appointment should stand. So this would be the issue on appeal. Now, if they were to be successful on that point, the question then becomes whether or not they're barred by statute of limitations when it comes to Comey, refiling when it comes to Letitia James. So all of these things are going to be at play. But because it's without prejudice, that is absolutely a critical factor here. There are avenues to continue to pursue these cases against Comey and James.
Okay, but what about Lindsay Halligan? If a judge is saying that she was unlawfully put in the position as acting U.S. attorney, can she continue to serve in that capacity?
She cannot. So her appointment right now is invalid. And what the court order says is that it's now up to the Eastern District of Virginia. It's up to the court to appoint that interim U.S. attorney. So there will be a lot of decisions to be made, because one of these factors is, while this appeal plays out, this case is going to be in legal limbo. But we know that before this case was ever brought, reporting indicates that other prosecutors did not want to bring the case, that they did not feel there was enough evidence. So will we see a situation where, in their prosecutorial discretion, they choose not to bring it? It really depends on which path plays out. You know, right now, we expect to see an appeal. You're going to see that stay. You're going to see that appellate issue likely an ask to be expedited and potentially reaching the Supreme Court. But as of now, the authority to appoint an interim attorney, a U.S. attorney, lies with the court, not the executive branch.
And Gary raised a good point here. If you were representing a client being tried in the Eastern District of Virginia right now, and there were a number of cases that were being filed under Halligan's purview, would you be filing a motion to have your case dismissed right now? Would you have any standing there?
Definitely, because your argument would be that her appointment was invalid, and therefore the exact same conclusion that the court came to in this case is that the indictment itself was void. So I know Gary said there's only 2 indictments where Halligan was the only U.S. attorney. That is going to be the cases that will be at issue, the ones where she was the only one presiding. Now, any case around the country, and I think there's several U.S. attorneys who are under the same scrutiny as far as process for their interim appointments, like Alina Habba. This is another case that bolsters that taking action on that front in any jurisdiction, in any federal jurisdiction where that issue is at play.
Okay, Misty, thank you for that. Obviously, a very important day in the courtroom. Let's turn now to Yamiche, who's at the White House. Yamiche, we got the legal response to all this. Let's talk about the political response. What's the White House saying?
The White House is really doubling down on these indictments. And of course, we should all remind folks that they came after President Trump publicly pressured Attorney General Pam Bondi to go after what he views as his political enemies, naming a number of people, including Letitia James and James Comey. So the White House officials I've been talking to have been putting out this idea that these cases are not changing, that they do expect to appeal, that nothing has changed other than the fact that they have to redouble their efforts. I think, as Gary and Misty pointed out, this is dismissed without prejudice, which means that the federal government can bring these charges again. So the White House here is feeling like they're still on firm ground to be able to bring these charges. And in some ways, they're going after the judge. You heard the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, say that the White House believes that Lindsay Halligan has been appointed rightfully and legally. So they are going to absolutely be going and going forward with an appeals process.
Have they said, though, how soon that could happen? And at what point would we expect this? And also, are they going to fight to keep Lindsay Halligan in that role?
Those are good questions. We're not exactly sure of the timing, but White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says that this is going to happen pretty soon. So we should imagine maybe today, maybe tomorrow. The White House has been pretty fast when it comes to appealing decisions that it does not like, including going to the Supreme Court if needed to appeal decisions. So I imagine that that's what they're going to do. And I also imagine that Lindsay Halligan, who is, of course, also a former personal attorney to President Trump, someone that he knows, someone that he handpicked to be in that office, that he's going to want to try to keep her in that position if he can. Ryan.
Okay. And Misty, let's go back to you quickly before we go. I mean, how does the statute of limitations apply throughout all of these cases?
So this is really important, especially when it comes to Comey. Remember that indictment came in just on the eve of when the statute of limitations was going to expire. So Gary referenced this rarely used law that allows for prosecutors to bring the case back within 6 months. That's generally used in the rare instances where there's a procedural defect. Comey's team is arguing this isn't a procedural defect. It is void. So this is a bit of a different argument that they will be raising when it comes to the impact of the statute of limitations to say, even if Lindsay Halligan is reinstalled as U.S. attorney, even if the appeal is successful, that the Department of Justice still, under no circumstances, can resurrect these charges against Comey. A novel legal issue that we'll see play out in this case.
Okay, there is a lot of moving parts related to this that is going to have to play out here over the next 6 months or so. Yamiche, you're going to stick around with us. Gary and Misty, thank you both for getting us started on